So, good afternoon, everyone. So, it's my pleasure to interact with you all in this Atal FDP. Uh, before I start, I would like to thank the organizers for this opportunity given to me to interact with you all in this great occasion. I hope my voice is audible.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I have session tomorrow also. So I have divided the work into the presentation into two parts. One, I will be discussing with the perspective of getting into the system, and another one is you get into the system. After that, you can misbehave. So it's like uh, authentication and then the post authentication attack part I'm considering. So today, just a second, please. So today I will be discussing about more on the authentication part, and in the tomorrow session I will discuss about the post authentication attacks where the insiders will play the major role. And this is also like some of the works we have done. So I have taken from our work and I am presenting. However, there are some contents I took from other sources. So I would like to acknowledge all those authors as well as the web source or the web service providers. In these 3 days, you might have gone through much about the smart metering infrastructure. So, when we talk about the smart meter, these days we know that at our houses, maybe not completely, but there are some places where they have already fixed the smart meter. So, which does the communication between the house and as well as the end user and the communication station where it has to be communicated. So if you see in this particular picture, so here we have the smart meter. So it may be the electric meter or gas meter or water meter, but our focus will be more on this electric meter. But the same thing can be used for gas as well as the water. And we will be having the communication network where the secure communication is required. I will not be discussing in this communication part. So after that, we have the third party who consolidate whatever information is shared by the smart meter. And also the third party will send some command to the smart meter. So this is the structure. So if you see here, it is given as advanced metering infrastructure. So I will let you know what's the difference. We can say smart metering infrastructure or advanced metering infrastructure or the advanced meter reading. So the smart metering infrastructure gives a lot of benefits. So the first one is the operational. It improves the accuracy that whatever the consumption by the consumers, because it is digital, so we will get the accurate reads, and it gives the financial benefits to both customer as well as the providers, because in case of customer they can use the electricity or any other based on the need, and also there is a possibility maybe we are not having in all the city now or in the villages now. So they say that the consumption of electricity, the price, that the unit price of the electricity will vary from time to time. So there are some peak hours and non-peak hours. So if you are going for peak hours, then the charge will be more when compared to non-peak hours. So the customer can choose which one can be the right time, and accordingly they can save their money. And it provides the security also. I cannot say that all alone the device provides the security, but since it is smart, if something goes wrong, it can intimate. In addition to that, if we build something on top of it, then it will provide better security than simply we are buying the smart meter with the traditional, let's say, the process which the smart meter has. And we can have the system reliability and the energy cost again with respect to consumer as well as the provider, and the electricity theft can be mitigated. So how this can be mitigated is, we know that in the smart meter, the consumption will be something, but at the service provider level, the consumption will be more. So when they are mapping this non-matching thing will give the indication to the provider that there is something wrong in so and so location. So accordingly, they can find out if there is any theft. So these are the features which we can achieve when we are going for smart metering infrastructure. So now, what's the difference between the advanced metering infrastructure and advanced meter reading? So see, we have the smart meter at our home. Not all. There are few maybe having. In some places, it is already placed. What it does is it gives the reading and it passes that reading message to the next level. So what happens in case of the smart grid or the power grid? So there will be, this is the household. So here we will be having that home area network, and we call something as the NAN, that is the neighborhood area network, which covers multiple home area networks. So after that, it is covered by the next level, so which we will not go right now. So in the home area network, we will be having the smart meter, and the power comes, and from here it get distributed. Actually, smart meter will not do the distribution. So there may be some other thing which does the distribution, but it maintains the record that how much is consumed. So what happens, whatever reading the smart meter has, the NAN gateway may take monthly once or weekly once or daily, hourly. So that information will be sent by the smart meter to the NAN gate. So this is what the smart meter does, or the advanced meter reading does. But now when we are going for the smart metering infrastructure or advanced meter infrastructure, so we are going to do something additional. So if you see in these two paragraphs, here it says that it will see what is the kilowatt per hour or watt per hour consumed, and it will be shared with both the parties. But when we are going for the infrastructure, it gives some additional information like cumulative kilowatt per hour usage and daily peak, last interval demand, and load profile, and there are many more. So what we are introducing in addition to this, why only this has to be done? Because we are bringing the smartness into the system, so we can do programming in it. So what we are saying is, we can go for, let's say there is another home area network. So let these two smart meters also communicate. So these all comes under the advanced metering infrastructure. So what happens, the advantage of having these communications, let's say that if the particular smart meter have to get some information from NAN gateway, maybe sometimes it is not accessible or it is having more load. So then that the respective information may be gained from the next smart meter which is nearby. So we cannot give exact information what NAN gateway can provide. Let's take an example. If the smart meter, this particular smart meter, it communicated already and got some information. So the information is available here. And this smart meter is unable to reach this NAN gateway due to some reason at some point of time. So then what it can do is, so it can send or request this smart meter, if so and so information is present with this particular smart meter, then it can get it. So these are like additional services we can get with the help of this advanced metering infrastructure or the smart metering infrastructure. So this is what our goal is, or this is what the advanced metering infrastructure goal is. So now let's come to the cybersecurity part. So we know that cybersecurity is to protect the interconnected systems. So that may be hardware, software, and the data, whatever is communicated between the nodes against the cyber threats. So in general, we look for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. In addition to that, we look for non-repudiation and other things. But the important requirement here is we want to make sure that confidentiality, integrity, and availability is achieved. So why all this cyber security is required? So it is because of the threats. So from where the threats will come from two parts. It may be of human and another one is the natural disasters. So like earthquake or flooding, so many other things. But this we cannot, with the cyber security and all, we cannot control. So this can be control. This can be overcome. So it overcome in the sense, if something happens, we have to make sure that the business is continuous. Okay, it should not get disturbed. So we have the concept of this BCP and BRP concept. So where it talks about the business continuity planning and disaster recovery planning, where they will have backup in different locations and all. And another one which comes from the human. So it has like malicious and non-malicious. So the behavior of human, they may put some threat or they may perform some attack on the system, and whoever performs the attack, maybe he is malicious or non-malicious. So how it becomes non-malicious? Sometimes unknowingly they will do the things because they don't know that some attack is happening because of this activity. So without knowing that, some employees may do it or somebody else may do it. It's not mandatorily only the employees. So why here it is given as employees? So the employees are already having the permission. So that's why it is given that the non-malicious activity will be done by the employees. So who is not aware of the things, whatever they are doing. And next is the malicious. Here the intent, whoever is having the intention to perform the attack on the system. So it may be outsider or it can be the insiders. So guys, if any of you having questions, no need to wait till I complete my lecture. Okay, in between, if you want, you can ask the questions. So we have outsiders as well as inside. So here, if we see insiders, so why they will perform the attack or why they have changed, why they will be changed as malicious, there may be various reasons. Somebody has compromised or they may be upset with the organization. So there are so many things. And here the thing is, if the insider is going to perform the attack, and the attack will be very dangerous. So anyway, the attack is dangerous, but with the help of insiders or by the insiders, if it is happening, then the damage will be very high and there is no effort required to perform the attack. The reason is he has the privilege. The insider, whomever we consider as an employee of an organization or part of an organization, he is having the privilege in the system. So he can directly perform the attack. So no additional things required. Maybe in some cases it is required, but when compared to the outsiders, insiders are having more features, or we can say path to perform the attack. So next, in case of the outsiders, which comes completely from outside our organization, these people have to put a lot of effort to perform the attack because they don't have the privilege. They have to break multiple walls and then get into the system, then perform the attack. So one way we will be focusing on the outsiders, and another one we have to focus on the insiders. In most of the places, they target on this and they miss this part. But we have to make sure that we concentrate on both. So in today's session, I will be concentrating on this, and tomorrow I will be discussing about this part, insider attack. So the threat comes from insider and outsiders. So what is the reason for all these threats? So what happens by default, we leave some vulnerability with the system. Okay, that vulnerability may be of various reasons we leave. And next is the ignorance. So the people may not be aware of the fact. So because of that, some attack may happen. And next thing is we want the performance. So when we are looking for performance, definitely there may be some loophole with the security protection. So because you know that, right? Whenever we want additional level, that is security, when we are going to add, definitely performance is going to get down little bit, or whatever it may be according to the level of security we are going to apply. But there are some organizations, they say, no, we need performance, better performance. So they don't look into the security point of view. But something happens, that is, if any attack happens, then they say that no, we have to concentrate on that. So that these are some of the reasons why these threats or attacks possible or happen in the particular system. So what we do is to allow the users into the particular system. For example, in this case, we have an organization, let's say, we take an example of the same smart metering infrastructure. So whatever the smart meters, so here we are not considering human, let's say we have only the IoT devices. The smart meters, whatever is there, here I am considering this as one smart meter, and there are so many smart meters, and these are connected with the NAND gateway. So now what happens is, now these smart meters want to communicate with this NAND gateway. Then in that case, they have to regularly, or they have to get first to prove their authenticity to the NAND gateway. Then they will get the necessary information. So now what happens, whether it may be the insider or outsider, they have to get or permission from the NAND gateway by providing their credentials, then they will be allowed. So now in case of insiders, so they have this authentication information and they get. But outsiders, they don't have that. So in that case, they are unable to get the permission from NAND gateway. So they have to see some alternate way to get into that. So now how the insiders will get authenticated? So we are having the authentication mechanism. So why we go for authentication? That to prove the ownership, that maybe one smart meter want to prove the ownership, that is the node connecting with, let's say, the NAND gateway. So to prove the ownership, authentication is required. And it is also required for the other side, that is one, that is, let's say, a sender and the receiver. The sender want to prove its identity to the receiver, and receiver should also know that the sender is so and so whom we are communicating. So it is not that the receiver will communicate with some node without knowing who it is. And next is, there are cases where we have to go for the mutual authentication. That means both the parties should get authenticated. So in case of smart metering infrastructure, smart meter also have to provide its authenticity proof. Similarly, NAND gateway should also provide the authenticity proof to the client. So that is the smart meter. So after doing all these things, the devices can get the service. That is, the one who is proving will get the service, and the one who is verifying will provide the services, and that is the resources, and maybe whatever proof the authentication node, the node which proves its authenticity, and that proof can be transferred to the next domain, and the same can be used without again proving the ownership. So these are the reasons why we want to go for the authentication. So what happens these days, most of the cases are centralized authentication. So there will be a server where the devices has to prove its identity to the centralized server that possesses all the related information. So that means the centralized server contains all the information. So whenever the client want to connect to the server, it has to provide its identity, prove its authenticity, and based on the information available with the centralized server, it will be verified. So what is the process usually happens is, at first the device register with the centralized server. After registering with centralized server may provide some credentials, or we can say the client itself will create the credential and share that with the centralized server, and centralized server keep that for the further authentication, that is the future authentication. So then in future, if the node want to get the service from the server, it will provide its credential and the server will authenticate. Or one machine can get into another machine, that means communicate with other machine and try to get authenticated. So the scenario is like this. Let's say this is the third party or the server. This is one smart meter, and this one is another smart meter. So this smart meters have registered. So this we refer as the registration. So the registration is done. After the registration, maybe this smart meter want to communicate with the server by providing the credentials. So the server will validate the credentials, and then it provides the service. But now what we are saying is we want that smart meter also among themselves it can communicate. That also we are going for. So now this smart meter can communicate with this smart meter, whatever the server already have provided the credential. So using the same credential, they both can validate with each other. But we have to make sure that when the credential is getting disclosed, this particular smart meter should know the private information, should not know the private information, that is the credential related sensitive information, private information to this smart meter. So accordingly, we have to design the algorithm. So now you can see the same thing is depicted. I will not go much deep into this particular algorithm. So let's say the user I, and this is the registration center. So user I here means smart meter 1, and then smart meter 2, and this is the NAN, that is the neighborhood area network gateway. So let's have this as the gateway. So now what happens in this case? First, the node smart meter 1 register with the registration center, and registration center already has some of the informations. Like you can see this is similar to RSA algorithm. So it provides the ID, and using this computation, these informations are computed for the smart meter, that is smart meter 1, and it is sent to the smart meter 1 by the registration center. So now the registration center have this, the smart meter 1 has this. So similarly, the smart meter 2 will also do. Similarly, the smart meter 2 will also do. The smart meter 2 will also have this. So it is like this. Now you can see, so up to this, it is similar to RSA. Now what is happening? Now these two smart meters, smart meter 1 and smart meter 2, they want to communicate. So what they do is they now, the concept similar to the Diffie-Hellman approach is applied to compute all these things, and it is sent here. And because for both the parties, that is user 1, the smart meter 1 and smart meter 2, the registration center has used some common value. So you can see this n, phi of n, e value and v value. So the common value is used for both. So with the help of this, the whatever information sent by smart meter 1 is verified at the receiver end. That is another smart meter. So then this smart meter will generate a session key based on the information whatever is shared by the smart meter 1. You can see this is similar to Diffie-Hellman. After that, it provides, this smart meter 2 provides information whatever is collected from the NAN gateway, not exactly by modifying that. Then it goes to the smart meter 1. Again, it validates whether this condition satisfies or not. If it satisfies, that means the node, whatever is claiming as smart meter 2, that is smart meter 2. And then it computes this session key. So this, if you see, whatever is given here in both the sides, it is GRI into RG. So this is what given. So now both the parties are having the session key. So now they will have the secure communication. So how this happens? This is with the help of the registration center. And the desired informations are available with this registration center. So what is the problem here? So the application security is the security, that means the security of the application is completely with the centralized server. If the centralized server is compromised, then what will happen? This PQ will be disclosed. If the PQ is disclosed, then V and E. So here we have taken E as 3, but when we are taking the small exponent value, then there is a possibility of cracking. This is very simple. So we have to have higher values for this. So then what happens? This PQ and other things are known. So if these are known to people, if the registration center is compromised, then performing the attack, anybody can prove to the smart meter 1 as smart meter 2 or smart meter 3. So the first problem is the security of the application is lying with the centralized server. And second one, as the number of devices increases, so when the number of client increases, the number of interactions between the server and devices increases. So sometimes what happens, the server may not be in position to give the service. And also there will be a time delay in getting the services. So that means the cost will be more. And the third one, it's not only that the centralized server get compromised. If the particular node is failed, then we can say the application is down. So in this case, if let's say these two nodes are registered, user one and smart meter one and smart meter two get registered with the registration center. After that, this is not required because the registration center is the trusted third party, but it is not online trusted third party. So that means for each and every communication, the need of registration center is not required. So only at the time of registration it is required. Later, this third party is not required. So as per I said here, if a single node failure, then it can cause application down. So that means if this one is down, I'm saying that the communications between smart meter 1 and smart meter will be down. So actually that is not going to happen because whatever information is there, with the help of those whatever information already got from the registration center. So with the help of that, the smart meter 1 and smart meter 2 can communicate. But if there is another smart meter 3 comes, then it cannot join into the application. So this is what the problem here. So what we can do is we can focus on the decentralization. So when there is a decentralization, we can distribute various things like storage and computation to multiple devices. But our focus here is not on that. We want that information should be available with different nodes or the devices. So in this case, what happens if one node fails, it is not going to impact the whole network. So even this decentralization allows the smart meters to communicate among themselves so that they can exchange some significant messages. So whenever we talk about the decentralization, these days people talk about the blockchain. So I hope you all might have seen or heard a lot of things about the blockchain, but I give some brief introduction about the blockchain, then we will go to the concept. So we know that this is the distributed database and the blocks will be keep on growing and each the blocks are connected cryptographically. So no modification is possible. And all the nodes participating in the network will be having the exact copy according to their level, the level in the sense their configurations. So there may be some node as full node and some node as light node. And the reason why people go for this blockchain is they know that, or we know that once we put the data, it's not possible to modify. Actually, we should not say that it is not possible to modify. We can say it is less possible or virtually impossible to modify. So the reason is, you know that, right? In case of proof of work, if more than 51% of the hash power is with an attacker, then they can fork the chain. So whatever is there in the particular block, that can be forked as another block and that will be part of the main chain. So that is the reason we say that it is virtually impossible or less impossible. And why we say that as virtually impossible when there is a possibility of fork, getting that 51% of hash power in the complete participant list. So it's not so easy. Maybe one attacker or set of attackers against the rest of the world, and having more than the hash power of the rest of the world is not so easy. So it has various features like decentralization, integrity of the data is maintained. We can have the public verifiability, but it depends. In some cases, they don't want the public verifiability, and it ensures availability because all the participating nodes will be having the copy of the data. And next is, because of all these things, the particular application is trusted. So if you see the Bitcoin, we are allowing the untrusted users. Even then, we say the Bitcoin application is trusted. So the same case here. And we have different types of blockchain. So one is the permissioned, and another one is the permissionless blockchain. In case of permission, so we know all the users beforehand, only they can participate in the blockchain application. In case of permissionless, we don't know any of them beforehand, and anybody can join and leave the network. It is according to them. So this is like, we can say, there are many applications. Like one is the cryptocurrency, and we can derive many applications for the permissionless. And in case of permission, we can say that health record management system or land record management system, those things. Because in all those cases, the clients are already known. And there is a concept of hybrid where these two combinations can be there. And next is the consortium, that is 2-3 organizations will come together and form the blockchain. So all may be having equal privilege, or some may be having the leader privilege and other things. So the disadvantage of blockchain when we talk about, so the first one, we know that the proof of work, which needs more computational power, and that may not be possible by the nodes. In our case, we are considering the smart metering infrastructure, which is, we know that it's the light node, and the configuration with that node will be very, very less. And solving this proof of work is not so simple, that I will show you maybe in the next slide. The complexity of solving this, even though this is simple hash function, but you have to find out some input which will be with producing the output less than the threshold. And next, we have the proof of stake, where they say in some cases, no need of doing mining. The one who is having the stake, they can create the blocks. So, however, even though they say mining is not required, but there are cases where they say here also mining required. Instead of asking everyone to mine, we will ask whoever is having more stake in the network will do the mine. So the computational cost from here to here is same, but the energy, whatever required for the proof of work, is less when compared to proof of, the energy required for proof of stake is less when compared to the proof of work. And the next drawback is with the storage, because we know that the blocks will be keep on growing. So it will be infinitely growing. So it should never stop, because this is the one going to confirm the transactions. So the users will put the transactions, and this will be committed into the block. So that means the transaction is confirmed, not maybe immediately. After a certain number of further blocks, we can say the transaction is considered as confirmed. Because in case of Bitcoin and Ethereum, there is a possibility of fork. So it will be keep on growing. And you see the storage requirement from the Genesis block to whatever is going to grow, we have to keep all those blocks. So in that case, what is going to happen? Again, whatever the IoT devices we are going to consider like smart metering infrastructure may not be having that sufficient storage. So that is another problem. So let me tell you that proof of work, why this complexity of this. So what I have done is I wrote a simple script to check how much time it takes. So you please refer this particular time. Okay, don't consider this. This is the time actually it took in the processor level. And you know that, right? The hash function we will be using, that is the puzzle function. It may be SHA-256. In my case, I have used SHA-256. This will take some input and this will produce some random output. So we know that hash function is random and it will produce the random output. However, the algorithm is deterministic. So that means whatever number of times you give the same input, you will get the same output. So that's why we say this as the deterministic algorithm. However, the output, whatever it produces, that is we can call this function as the random function. So nobody can say that this will be the output. For example, the machine learning cannot predict for this input, this will be the output because it has the randomness. So this is the puzzle. So now what the proof of work says is you give the input to this hash function and it produces the output, but that should be less than some target. So let's say this is x and this x should be less than the target. So the target will be fixed in the hash output range. So let's say the hash output range of this is 0 to 9. Whatever input you give, the output will belongs to this range. But in some case, what we will do, we will put the cutoff here as the threshold, let's say 5. So you give the input, let it produce the output, but that output should be belongs to this. So then only I will consider that the output is or the puzzle is successfully solved. So instead of 0 to 9, actually what is there is 0 to 2 power 256 minus 1. So this is the range. So here we will fix the threshold. According to the threshold, the difficulty varies. So I have considered the threshold here as 2 power 250, then 2 power 240, 230, 210, and 220, and then 210. And the input, whatever I have taken is in the blockchain, usually the input is the static part of the block and the dynamic, that is the nonce. So here I have taken something AA. After that, A1, then A2, A3. So it was going like this. Because this part I have kept as fixed because same thing has to be done in the blockchain. So A1, A2, A3. And if that one is over, let's say up to 1000 or something, then it goes with B1, B2, B3. So it's like that. Or we can say I go with AA, AB, AC, then BA. So it was like that. So now I fixed the threshold as this 2 power 250. And when I was running this particular hash function in infinite loop, so in 0.328 seconds, that means in these many attempts, I could find the input which will produce the output less than this threshold. So next I put 240, and in these many seconds, that is 0.356 seconds, and with these many number of attempts, I could find the input which could produce the output less than this threshold. So when I am going to 2 power 230, it took these many seconds, almost a minute, and these many attempts. And this is ran by a machine which has 4 cores. So 4 parallel cores, the scripts were running. That is with the help of that language that supports the parallel execution. So through that, 4 cores were used, and it is parallelly getting or finding the input which will produce the output less than that threshold. So then I put 2 power 210, and that says that that takes these many seconds and approximately 2 power 32 attempts. And when I have gone for 210, and the machine was running for these many seconds, but I could not find the output. So it was almost more than a day. I could not find the output. If you see in Bitcoin, it has to be solved in approximately 10 minutes. And if we see in Ethereum, it has to be solved in 15 seconds, even though the difficulty varies from one to another. In that, if we are going to use the similar algorithm for ours, that is the smart metering infrastructure, which has the constrained devices, so then it will be very, very complex. So if we talk about the permissionless network, we'll be mostly going for the proof of work, and that is not possible. So we have to find or choose which one will be an alternate which needs less computational time. So that one we have to choose. So the solutions, if we see, instead of going for the proof of work or proof of stake, so we can go for the Byzantine fault tolerance. But when we are going for Byzantine fault tolerance, this one brings permissioned. So in permissionless, we cannot use the Byzantine fault tolerance, because here there should be a condition that at least so many number of users should be trusted. So the same thing we are having in permissionless also when we are going with proof of work. And the other thing, this has the problem of fault, this scalability. So that I will discuss in the next slide. So when we are going for permission, yes, this is the best solution. So whatever the problem we have with proof of work, and when we are having the permission network, so the same proof of work is not required. So we can apply this Byzantine fault tolerance for the consensus. And in case of the storage, so Ethereum has proposed light Ethereum subprotocol. So what in this concept they have said is they divided the nodes into two types, full and the light node. So if we see the block, so it will be like this. So this part is called as the header, and this is the data part. So what this protocol says is the light node, which is not having sufficient storage or the power, then it can store only the header. So no need to store the data. So then what happens? The need of storage is largely reduced. However, these nodes, the one light nodes, whatever stores header, it needs the help of the full node for any validation. That if any data is required, then light node has to contact the full node. But it can validate without anyone support, because it is having the root hash of this data tree, that is the Merkle tree, and other informations are present in the header. Next, this IOTA, this is mainly for, we can say, the Internet of Things. So they have introduced the concept of snapshot. So what the snapshot says is, let's say here they don't use the concept of blockchain. They talk about the tangle here, that is the directed acyclic graph. So for an assumption, let's say that the blocks are going like this. If you don't have storage to store the next block, so what you can do is you can take the snapshot of this. So snapshot means we know that, right? After going through all this, we know what will be the data of each and every user. So user 1 this data, user 2 this data, user 3 this data, and then you remove all this. So this is what suggested in snapshot. So again, you accommodate the future blocks. Once you face the same issue that you don't have storage, then again you take the snapshot. That means you update this. But in this case also, in snapshot also, we need some full nodes or the permanent nodes or the bootstrap nodes, which is the developer node, to store the entire tangle. So instead of blocks, they use the concept of tangle, so which has only the transactions. But again, they use the concept of bundle and all. So the next one is the eraser code. So in eraser code, what happens? They split the block into multiple fragments, and each node will store some of the fragments, not necessarily that all the fragments will be stored. So let's say if the block is of 10 KB or let's say 1 KB, so all of them will be storing 0.1 KB. So we can have like this, or even lesser than this. So then what happened, instead of storing 1 KB, I am going for 0.1 KB or lesser than this, or maybe I will be having two fragments also. So definitely the number of or the storage requirement is largely reducing for me. But the computation cost increases because once you cut, one thing is first you have to do the fragmentation, and second thing, when you want to rebuild the block, you have to collect the data from the neighbors, and then again you have to do the computation to bring out, that is the assembling you have to do to get the block. So the computational requirement will increase here. And next is the Liddy chain. So what they do is here also similar to deleting the things, but the one assumption they kept, there are applications where we don't need very old data. So in that case, we can delete old blocks. So here they use the concept of the tree. All the blocks are arranged in a tree based on the expiry time of the blocks. So each block will be given an expiry time at the time of mining itself. So whenever the particular block that my expiry time is 0, so then what happens? That particular node will be deleted. And there is a case, let's say here the expiry time is 1 second, here 2 seconds, and here 3 seconds. So even though the expiry time of this particular node is 1, that is the block is 1, it will not get deleted because the child nodes are having more expiry time. So this node have to wait till the expiry time of this. After that, the complete one will be deleted. So then the next block will be accommodated. So what happens? The storage will be almost in the constant level. And next is hours. What we have done is we are going to delete the blocks, but we are going to keep the we are dividing the blocks into certain set, that is the number of blocks we are going to take in the set, and we have the hash of it. Using that, so it is like in snapshot you are deleting. So if you are deleting, you are leaving or you are having the sufficient space, but there is a possibility of introducing the forks. So what we are doing is we are keeping the set hash. With the set hash, we will validate in future that if something gives the fork and try to make that as the main key. The fork here in the sense that illegal fork they give and try to make that as the main key. So now the research is going on in this storage reduction part also. So now you can see the complexity related to the storage is also reduced. So with respect to computation also, we can claim that we don't need the storage up to the computation up to the level of proof of concept, and in storage also not up to the level of traditional blockchain. So we can see the comparison of different consensus protocols. We cannot say that these are for the consensus, but this is used for the consensus. However, these are the consensus protocols. So first one is the proof of work, then proof of stake, and next is the dedicated proof of stake, then PBFT, that is the practical Byzantine fault tolerance, and then the Ripple. So you can see here it contains two categories. One is the probabilistic and then the absolute. So in case of probabilistic, let's say I mine a block, I broadcast to my neighbors, and further it gets broadcasted to the network. So in this case, there is no guarantee that whatever block I have mined, that will be part of the main chain. So that's why these protocols are probabilistic. But in case of this practical Byzantine fault tolerance and in Ripple, whatever I prepare, that will be definitely part of the main chain. So that's why it says that absolute finality. And fault tolerance up to 50% in all these three cases, that is up to 50% of malicious users or malicious users having the computational power can manage. In case of this, it can sustain only 33% of malicious users, and here it can sustain only 20% of malicious users. So the difference, I forgot to mention that the difference between the proof of stake and the delegated proof of stake. So in case of proof of stake, whoever is having more stake, they are going to perform like validation or creating the block. In case of the delegated proof of stake, the one who is having the stake, they can delegate their power to some other node which is not having that equivalent or the required stake to perform the operations. So that's why it's delegated proof of stake. So the power consumption, if we see here, it is very large. And in these two cases, it is comparatively less when compared to the proof of work. In PBFT and Ripple, there is no need to solve any puzzle. It's only like sending and validating. So it's very negligible. When we talk about the scalability, that means adding the new users. So in proof of work and proof of stake and the delegated proof of stake, so it is really good. But when we talk about the practical Byzantine fault tolerance, it is very bad. The reason is we have to get the consensus from the connected neighbors before creating the or sending the final block. And in Ripple, they say that it is good, but if you see here, it can sustain only up to 20% of malicious users. So the application, if we see the proof of work, proof of stake, and delegated, these are public. But in case of PBFT and the Ripple, this is permission. So that means that the users or the participants are already known. So now the blockchain selection, because we have seen different types of blockchain, that is public and permission. And in public, in permission blockchain, we can again categorize into two. One is public permission and another one is the private permission. So what is the difference between the two is, let's say that one is validation and another one is creation. So if we want validation as well as creation should be done by only the known users, that is the authenticated users or the approved users, then let's go for the private permission. Otherwise, if we say that writing operation, that is the creation, I want only my employees to do, but validation can be done by anybody. So in that case, we can go for public permission blockchain. So what is the need of this particular flow chart is, let's say you are going to develop an application where security is very important, you need a decentralization, and then you are planning to use blockchain. So you have to decide what type of blockchain to be used, and you have to see whether blockchain is required for your application or not. So for that case, you can use this particular flow diagram and check it. So the first thing in your application, do you want to store the state? Because at any point of time, the node will be on some state and that state is not constant. It will be varying. If it is, then go for the next question. Otherwise, there is no need to use blockchain for your application. And the next thing is when you are having multiple writers. If you have only one writer, then it is not required. That is, the blockchain is not required. Otherwise, you take the next question. Can you use an always online trusted third party? If you are going to use the online trusted third party, then in that case, there is no point in using the blockchain. That is online trusted third party. There is no point in using the blockchain. Otherwise, you can take the next question, that is, are all writers known? If you don't know the writers, that is the one who is going to participate in your application, then you go for permissionless blockchain. Otherwise, you come towards the permissioned blockchain and take the next question, are all writers trusted? If you think that all your organization employees are trusted, then you don't use blockchain. Otherwise, you think of permissioned blockchain and then you decide whether you want public to verify or not. If public verification required, go for public permission blockchain. Otherwise, you go for private permission blockchain. Actually, this question is there, but we should not consider that all are trusted. in any of the organization, including, let's say, the partners, they are having equivalent stake in that organization. Even then, there is a possibility one partner may do something wrong. So, in any organization, even though we trust our people, but it is not completely like we trust and we leave that we simply neglect that there won't be any security issue because of them. So now the important thing is when you are going to use the blockchain. So one is the computation efficiency, and another one is computation efficiency, and another one is the storage. So both the things we have some solution. And now when we are going to use this in lightweight devices, there are transactions, because in blockchain we will put everything as a transaction, and we access the information which is stored in the form of a tree. So we measured the latency. So when we measured in the normal desktop computer, so these times are for the transactions and these are for the data access from the blockchain. So definitely transactions will take more time when compared to data access, because in transaction different validations are required, but that is not required in case of the data access. So the same thing we have done in the light device, that is the Raspberry Pi, which has this configuration. You can see the time it takes for accessing the data, which here if we see the maximum is 4 milliseconds, but here it goes around 10 milliseconds. And the transaction time also, it takes a lot. But if you see, this is not huge, this is manageable. So we can say that the blockchain can be applied to the lightweight applications also. So now with all these things, now we can apply this to the smart metering infrastructure, let's say. So at first we consider, that is for this particular session, we consider we are going to do authentication. So we are going for the authentication purpose using the blockchain. So now let's say that we will have this simple architecture kind of thing. Let's say this is the blockchain. And here we have the smart meters. We'll have with a different shape. And there is a NAND gateway. And with the NAND gateway, smart meters are connected. And the smart meter will, the NAND gateway will connect with this blockchain. So now both the smart meter as well as the NAND gateway are entity of the blockchain. So this means, so right now if you see the smart meters contact the NAND gateway reaches the blockchain and gives the information. So it is not that this is maintained separately. Okay, so this is also part of the NAND gateway. Already NAND gateway has the blockchain, or NAND gateway is the client of this particular blockchain application, and NAND gateway is having the copy of the blockchain and performing the operations. So if we are having only NAND gateway here, that is not sufficient. So we will make that these nodes, that is the smart meters, also contact the blockchain. That means they are also going to store the blockchain and they will be performing the operations. So there may be some node which cannot store all these things, irrespective of whatever less storage and complexity we are talking about. So in that case, it will not store anything. It will contact the next smart meter or the NAND gateway for any information from the blockchain. So this is what the concept is. So the first thing what we are going to do is, that is authentication. Second one is the insider attack, which I will not be discussing today. Only this part we will discuss. And we are going for the decentralized authentication mechanism. So in simple, I will explain before going to this. What is going to happen is, this particular smart meter is going to get registered with the blockchain, and later smart meter and the NAND gateway or the smart meter to smart meter will prove its or they prove their authenticity and they will go for secure communication. So this is what the requirement is. Now we have the smart meter and we have the NAND gateway. It first does the registration. So we consider this as the NAND gate. So at the time of the registration, the things or whatever information given by the smart meter that goes to the blockchain. So the blockchain keeps the information. And whenever this particular smart meter prove its authenticity to anyone else, it will simply give its ID and the signature. The remaining informations are available in the blockchain. Maybe either the NAND gateway or the smart meter will fetch the data from the blockchain and it can validate the authentic information or the authenticity of the smart meter. So we can see in this case, so we have the NAND gateway and then the smart meter. So here we should keep the assumption that because smart meter most of the time it will be supplied by the electricity department. So they know the ID and all, they register that. After that, the smart meter generates its key pairs, private and public key pairs, one for communication and one for the blockchain purpose. Maybe according to our requirement, we can have only one key pair also. So why I kept two here is if one is compromised, the other will remain safe. So that's the reason with two different key pairs. So the smart meter generates. So you see in the previous example that is here, the necessary informations are with only the registration center, or we can say these are also secrets, but these secrets are only with the registration center. So if this is compromised, then everything is compromised. So now in this case, whatever is secret, that will be only with the respective client, not with anybody else. So now there are two key pairs generated. After that, the smart meter generates its address. I hope you all know how the address in blockchain application can be computed, maybe either this Bitcoin or Ethereum. And then it sends the information along with address, then this public key, because this one is not required in case of Ethereum because they can derive that. Then ID. So all these three things will go to this particular NAND gateway. And this NAND gateway already knows the ID of the smart meter, so it will validate that. So after that, it creates a transaction. As I said that in blockchain, we have to put the things as the transaction. So the transaction, that is the joint transaction. New node is going to be introduced into the blockchain application that will be done by the NAND gateway. So it is not the case the smart meter will directly reach. So here the case is through NAND gateway, it reaches the blockchain application. That is, it is going to take part in the blockchain application through NAND gateway at first. So the NAND gateway creates the transaction, which includes its own address because it is very much required for the validator who is adding that smart meter. After that, the address of the smart meter, ID of the smart meter, then the public key, whatever it has provided. So all these things are made into a transaction and this is passed into the network. So now the participating nodes will validate this. After that, they will commit into the blocks. So once it is committed into the block, that means now this particular smart meter is part of the blockchain application. So in this case, now the smart meter sent the information and the NAND gateway registers its detail. Now the smart meter is part of the application. So once the NAND gateway broadcast, it does not mean that it is confirmed. Okay, so it has to be committed into the block, and that particular block should not be the 4th. But in our case, we are going for the permissioned blockchain. So in this case, there is no fork possible. However, it should take part in the block. So then only we will say that the smart meter is part of the chain. That is the blockchain. So once the registration is done, let's say now the smart meter is going to communicate with the NAND gateway or maybe with some other smart meters. So first it has to prove its authenticity. So now if we see in blockchain, the public key of the smart meter is available. Let's say smart meter 1. So similarly, smart meter 2 public key. So like this, all the smart meters and NAND gateway public keys are available in the blockchain. So what the smart meter will do, it will fetch its private key. It has its private key. So here, this I am referring. CP, that is C private key and C public key as private and public key here. So it uses its private key. Using that, the ID of that particular smart meter is signed. So taking the hash, then encrypting it, and the signed message is given to the NAND gateway. So this is happening off chain, that is outside the blockchain. Now there is no blockchain communication or contact is required. So after that, once this message comes, now this particular NAND gateway will take the data, that is fetch the data from the blockchain. So what is the data it has to fetch? That is the public key of this smart meter. So that along with the signature, ID will also come. So based on that ID, because the blockchain already has its ID, so based on that ID, the public key of that particular smart meter will be fetched. After that, using that public key, so whatever is encrypted here, that will be decrypted and it gets the output of this, and it has the ID whatever is received, and it computes the hash and it match. So if both are matching, then it is considered that we are contacting or the request has come from the right smart meter, otherwise it is not. So here simply we are having the signature, anybody can copy and send it. We can consider the timestamp and all will also be used. So now the authentication is proved. So smart meter proves to NAND gateway. So similarly, NAND gateway can prove to the smart meter. And next is the confidential, the secure communication between the NAND gateway and then the smart meter. So what happens is, let's say if the smart meter want to communicate with the NAND gateway, so they will be having a session key, or we can say the secret key. This will be symmetric key. So that is for both encryption as well as decryption, the same key will be used. So they have to share the key. So after authentication, what the smart meter will do, smart meter will fetch the public key of the NAND gateway. This is like public key infrastructure for sharing the symmetric key. It fetches the public key from the blockchain, because smart meter is also already part of the blockchain, or this can, in case the smart meter is unable to store all these things, it can reach another smart meter or NAND gateway and ask for the public key of this particular NAND gate. So once that public key comes, the smart meter generates its session key, which is a random value, and then encrypt using the public key of the NAND gateway, and it sends here. So once it has come, it has its own private key. It decrypts whatever is sent by the smart meter and it takes yes. So now both the parties are having the shared secret. So using that, they will go for the secure communication. So for the communication, maybe that sharing the consumption of the electricity, that is number of units consumed, or let's say if the power is not there, the smart meter will ask when the power will come, and it can give some complaint that there is a fluctuation and all. So all these things will happen in this case. So whatever message they want to share, that is between smart meter and NAND gateway or smart meter to smart meters, they can perform. So now here there is no centralized authority. we have centralized authority, we can say, in this place. That is the NAN gateway we are considering, but that is only for introducing the smart meter into the blockchain applications. And if we see, all the secrets are with the respective clients only, not with the NAN gateway or any other authorized user. One thing we can say that in this case, if we see this ID and all, so because when we get the smart meter from our local electricity office, so they will be maintaining the ID and that will be validated. So we will say only in that case that centralized one is required and they have that information. But all the private information, that is the sensitive data, are only with the clients. Only the public informations are available with the blockchains. That means it is like public, anybody can access it. So in this way, we can perform the authentication in the smart metering infrastructure, which is decentralized. And even if one NAND gateway file fails, for example, let's say that we have a region and this is the NAND gateway, all the home area network are connected. And this is the NAND. And there will be another region, again there will be a NAND, and then this home area network. So now what happens in this case? Let's say if this, because these both are also part of the blockchain, okay, we'll be running the single blockchain for all, the complete smart metering infrastructure, or we can say the grid. Not the entire, only for the smart metering infrastructure of particular larger region. Okay, there we are having the sub-regions. So if all these are connected into the same blockchain, if this one is not going to provide service due to some reason, so then this can take the role of this and perform that. And during that time, no need to exchange any message of these two here, because already this is introduced. This NAND gateway introduced these nodes and it is part of the blockchain. Whatever information is available here, using that, this NAND gateway will provide the service. So only thing required is all these home area network should be intimated that instead of this NAND gateway, you have to contact this NAND gateway. That's so with this one, we can say that one node failure is not going to affect the network. Okay, so that's it for this session. So if you have any questions, then please let me know. Any questions you have? I hope I am audible.
Yes, sir. Your voice is clear.
Okay.
Participants, you have any query? Participants, if you have any query or any more information you want to need, you may ask to the sir. In the chat box, we are mentioning that very nice session. You can read the chat box. It is there, extraordinary session and all.
That's okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Really, it is an extraordinary session for all of us because it is very new for all of us. And in this depth knowledge, we never come across this in-depth knowledge of this.
Okay.
So any of the participants?
Okay, madam, then if there are no questions, then we may end up the session. Okay,
So
if
can
they
I
have...
summarize? Can I summarize few points of your talk in front
Yes,
of
yes,
all?
yes. Yes, please. Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. So today, Dr. S. Venkatesh sir has delivered the talk on the blockchain for smart metering infrastructure. Sir has started his talk with advanced metering infrastructure, which includes many benefits like accuracy, operational benefits, theft reduction, financial benefits, security, the reliability of the system, and energy cost. Sir has given us the very basic concept what aim do the reading, that is advanced metering. It provides the reading of KWH reading, and it also provides the many other readings like peak KW demand for the system. Sir has given us a very brief idea about the cybersecurity, that it is the protection of the internet. And Sir has quoted the various security threats that can be human-made, or that can be natural disaster. Human-made also, there can be the crackers, or there can be the hackers, the employees, ignorant employees, or there can be some other various threats. The natural disaster includes that can be the flood and earthquake. There are then given about the authentication, and there are authentication. There are various ways. The one is the central authentication. The various its issues and many working related to this one. Then Sir has given the very brief about the blockchain and what the blockchain is, what are its features, and its various characteristics that it cannot. There are many blocks which are connected to the chains, and there is very less chances of modification. That which is an immutable kind of system. Then Sir is quoted about the types of blockchain, that is general, hybrid, and Ethereum, and their computational accuracy, and many more of this, which is not here in my scope. So I am very thankful to you. We have given the depth knowledge about this blockchain and computational accuracy and everything. So we are very privileged to hear from you. Any of the participants want to speak? Any of the participants, Mr. Ajay? Okay, Dr. Rajiv sir.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so we
Thank you,
conclude
Venkatesh
the
sir.
session now?
Venkatesh sir है क्या?